This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good morning students. Once again, I am your new assistant professor Dr. B. Satish Kumar, Ashram Medical College, Eluru. Today I am going to talk about the anatomy and physiology of paranasal sinus. Okay. So before going on to the, let me briefly introduce what are the paranasal sinuses. Today we are going to discuss paranasal sinuses in the four main topics. Anatomy of the paranasal sinuses and physiology of the paranasal sinuses, and apart from that some clinical aspects. And I know some people will be studying for PG right now, from starting right now. So we also discussed what the entrance point of view, some points regarding paranasal sinuses. Okay. Coming to the introduction part, paranasal sinuses, what does that mean is para means adjacent, nasal means nasal cavity or nose, sinuses means spaces. Okay, these paranasal sinuses are the spaces adjacent to the nose. Okay. These paranasal sinuses are air-filled spaces found in the skull bone. As the name suggests, these spaces surround the nasal cavity, adjacent to the nasal cavity. Okay, and these paranasal sinuses are paired in, and there are four in number. So usually we're having four pairs, and those are frontal sinus, maxillary sinus, ethmoid sinus, and sphenoid sinus. Okay, able to follow? And again, these ethmoid sinuses are subdivided into anterior, middle, and posterior subgroups. And coming to the development part of the paranasal sinuses, these are just outpouchings of the mucosa of the nasal cavity. So obviously these are lined by the same epithelium nasal cavity of the nasal cavity and lower respiratory tract, which is by ciliated pseudostratified columnar respiratory epithelium. Ciliated because the nasal secretions and paranasal secretions able to, which are produced in the nasal cavity, has to drain naturally. So the cilia helps in the mucus uh, movement of the mucus secretions. And columnar, obviously, in due to tied over the traumatic situations, the epithelium is columnar is more stronger than squamous epithelium. And these paranasal sinuses are again divided into anterior and posterior components. As we said earlier, there are four sinuses: maxillary, ethmoid, frontal, and sphenoid sinus. And these are again divided into two types: anterior and posterior. In the anterior group, we will be having maxillary sinus, ethmoid sinus, and in the ethmoid, anterior ethmoid and frontal sinuses comes under anterior group. And in the posterior group, we will be getting posterior ethmoid sinus and sphenoid sinus. Now coming to the development, as we said earlier, these paranasal sinuses are just outpouchings of the mucous membrane of the nasal cavity. And these paranasal sinuses communicate into the nasal cavity through their respective ostium, or also known as singular ostium. And coming to the developmental part, regarding the maxillary sinus, it is the first sinus to appear between 7th to 10th week of gestation. And examination point of view, you will be getting a question regarding which is the first maxillary sinus to develop. Which is the first sinus? Here the maxillary sinus. This is one of the MCQ which will be frequently getting in PG entrance point of view. And the first sinus to develop in paranasal sinuses is, you will be getting four options: maxillary, frontal, sphenoid, and ethmoid. The answer you have to pick is here maxillary sinus. And it appears as a shallow groove expanding from the primitive ethmoidal infundibulum into the mass of maxilla. And another point I want to stress here is all the sinuses, maxillary, ethmoid, frontal, and sphenoid, are named according to the bone in which the skull they locate. So maxillary sinus will be locating the maxillary bone, frontal sinus will be locating the frontal bone, and ethmoid sinus in the ethmoid, and sphenoid in the body of the sphenoid, and to some extent in the wing of sphenoid. And coming to the development part of maxillary sinus, it is resulted by the expansion and absorption results in a small sinus cavity at birth. And another MCQ here is the sinus which is present at birth is maxillary sinus. Okay. And the sinus is also present at birth, which will be discussed later. So here the two MCQs which got here are the sinus which starts first appearing in to develop is a maxillary sinus, and the sinus which present at birth is maxillary sinus. And development, regarding the development of maxillary sinus, it has biphasic growth pattern, which means it appears at birth. I mean, it is present at the birth, and it shows two spurts of growth patterns at the age of until the age of 3 to 7 years, and the second spurt growth is up to 17 to 18 years. So this means at the by the age of 18 years, the development of maxillary sinus is completed. And any abnormality or disruption in the development of maxillary sinus leads to hypoplasia or aplasia of the maxillary sinus. And coming to the clinical point of view, what that mean regarding the development of maxillary sinus? So how will you identify the aplasia or hypoplasia of the maxillary sinus? So when you see any X-ray of the patient having X-ray skull view, a Waters view, you will be having a maxillary sinus here and here, which is air-filled cavities. We will be seeing black color spaces. But how will you identify whether it is aplasia, hypoplasia, or normal maxillary sinus? There are 3 to 4 points which you should recognize whether hypoplasia or normal. See, usually the shape of the maxillary sinus is quadrangular shape. Okay. And but in the hypoplasia type of maxillary sinus, the shape of the maxillary sinus is not quadrangular; it is oval in shape. Okay, and also the shape of the orbit also varies in the maxillary sinus hypoplasia, because obviously the orbit is a superior boundary to the maxillary sinus. As we know, here the maxillary sinus, here will be the orbit. So once there is a hypoplasia of the maxillary sinus, the size of the orbit also varies, which will be also in more or less oval in shape, which is not in regular normal maxillary sinus patients. So there will be oval shape of the maxillary sinus, and there will be oval shape of the orbit. And the third point is, as we discussed earlier, the age of there is a biphasic growth pattern up to 7 years. The maxillary sinus reaches the floor of the nasal cavity. I mean, it will be below the nasal cavity floor. The floor of the maxillary sinus will be below the floor of the nasal cavity in adults. If there is a hypoplasia of the maxillary sinus, the floor of the maxillary sinus will not be below the floor of the nasal cavity. Hope you are clear. In hypoplasia, the floor is above the nasal cavity or at the level of nasal cavity, but not below the level of nasal cavity. Hope this point is clear to everyone.
Yes, sir.
So what are the 3 points by which you can recognize the hypoplasia of the maxillary sinus? The oval shape of the maxillary sinus and oval shape of the orbit, and the floor of the maxillary sinus not reaching below the level of floor of the nasal cavity. And by these 3 points you can see, you may suspect in an X-ray of the paranasal sinuses whether the maxillary sinus is hypoplastic or normal. Okay. And coming to the anatomy part, as you all know, anatomy is somewhat very dry subject. Let me let you bear with that. And the maxillary sinus, among the 4 sinuses, the largest paranasal sinus is the maxillary sinus. And another point regarding the practical, I mean, exam point of view, the largest paranasal sinuses is maxillary sinus, and it is all as we discussed earlier, it is pyramidal in shape, which is having the base pointed towards, as you can see my pointer, the base is pointed towards the lateral wall of the nose, towards the nasal cavity. The apex is pointed towards the zygomatic process of the bone. Here you can see the arrow, the apex is pointed towards the zygomatic process or lateral process, and the base is pointed towards the lateral wall of the nose. The capacity of the, I mean, paranasal sinus is about almost in an adult, it is up to 30 ml. And this maxillary sinus is also known as antrum of Highmore. Maxillary sinus or maxillary antrum, this is the other name. And this sinus, maxillary sinus, is also known as antrum of Highmore. You may also get a question like this: what is which is known as the antrum of Highmore? You may get again the 4 options, because the options are very obviously fancy. The examiner also wants to try to give these type of questions, especially especially paranasal sinuses, you will be getting any exam point of view in bits. So which is known as the antrum of Highmore, you will be getting, the answer is a maxillary sinus. And coming to the relations of the maxillary sinus, you will be having anterior, the facial surface of the maxilla and the cheek, anterior surface. This is the maxillary sinus. These both are the maxillary sinus. Anteriorly, you will be having facial surface of maxilla and cheek, and posteriorly, behind, you will be having two fossa, which are known as pterygopalatine fossa and infratemporal fossa. This is the temple now, infratemporal fossa and pterygopalatine fossa. And in these pterygopalatine fossa and infratemporal fossa, you will be having so many important structures like maxillary artery, maxillary division of fifth cranial nerve, and all will be having important contents like pterygopalatine ganglion and everything. And coming to the medial boundary, this is a medial boundary. You will be having nasal cavity, lateral wall of the nasal cavity. You will be having middle meatus and inferior meatus. And coming to the floor, you will be having the floor of the maxillary sinus. You will be having, as you all know, this is the maxilla and this is the mandible, yes, which are having the tooth on both maxilla and mandible. The floor of the maxillary sinus is formed by the alveolar process and palatine process of the maxilla. And roof of the maxillary sinus is obviously formed by the floor of the orbit, and which having the infraorbital artery and nerve. Hope you are clear here. And coming to the blood supply, you will be having facial artery, infraorbital artery, and bladder palatine arteries. Venous drainage is through facial vein. And any inflammation or sinusitis patients, you will, the lymphatic drainage of the maxillary sinus is the submandibular nodes. Submandibular nodes, this is a mandible node. The nodes which are present in the submandibular region are no submandibular nodes, which belong to level 2 group of lymph nodes. You will be also getting a question regarding which level of group nodes. There are about 7 levels of group of lymph nodes in the head and neck, in the neck region. In the level 2 group, you will be having this 1B group, you will be having submandibular lymph nodes. Submental will be coming on as 1A group, and submandibular will be getting it as 1B group. And the nerve supply of the maxillary sinus, you will be having infraorbital nerve, superior alveolar nerves, which are again divided into anterior, middle, and posterior superior alveolar nerves and greater palatine nerves. And coming to the clinical aspect, this canine fossa is very important coming to the maxillary sinus point of view. This is the point where I am showing is the canine fossa region, which is the thinnest portion of the anterior wall of the maxillary sinus. As we know, anterior relation of the maxillary sinus is the bone, maxillary bone, and the cheek region. So the region where there is the thinnest portion of the anterior wall of the maxilla is known as canine fossa region, this point. And coming to the canine fossa boundaries, it is inferiorly bounded by alveolar ridge. This is the alveolar ridge where you are having the teeth, laterally by the canine eminence, this one canine eminence, and superiorly by the infraorbital foramen. The infraorbital foramen is present just below the infraorbital margin, the orbit. This is orbit, and you will be having infraorbital foramen. And medially pyriform aperture. This opening which is present in the skull, this is known as a pyriform aperture. This forms the medial boundary of the canine fossa. Medially pyriform, and above is the infraorbital foramen, infraorbital margin, and below is the alveolar ridge. And this canine fossa is the thinnest portion of the anterior wall of the maxillary sinus. And through this thinnest portion of the maxillary sinus, you will be doing Cardwell look surgery is performed in this surgery. So usually before the era of the FES, functional endoscopic sinus surgery, all the diseases of the maxillary sinus usually approach it through this canine fossa, because obviously the skull is heavier and thicker. But in this canine fossa region, the skull is, the anterior wall of the maxillary sinus is very thin, so that by the drilling or by goose and hammer process, or by as I said, drilling process, usually in the previous olden days, there is an approach to the maxillary sinus through this canine fossa region. So this is usually the surgery is known as Cardwell look surgery. Then coming to the applied part, as I said, canine fossa is used as an entry point in Cardwell look surgery. It is just 2 mm thick, because it is the thinnest portion. You will be entering this. Roof of the maxillary sinus is weakened by the presence of infraorbital canal and infraorbital foramen. As we said, the roof of the maxillary sinus is formed by the infraorbital canal, which is having infraorbital foramens through which infraorbital nerves and vessels passes. Obviously, through anything, if there is an opening, the roof is weakened by these openings. In children, the floor of the maxillary sinus lies at the same level as of the nasal cavity. In adults, it lies about 5 to 10 mm below the level of nasal cavity. As we said before, the floor of the nasal cavity in adults will be below the level of, floor of the maxillary sinus will be below the level of nasal cavity. But in children, as we said, there are two spurts of growth at the age of 7 years and 18 years. In 7 years, there will be at the level of the floor of the maxillary sinus. Nasal cavity floor will be at the level of maxillary sinus floor in children, but not in adults. But even in adults, if there is floor is not below the level of maxillary cavity, nasal cavity, what we should suspect? We should suspect maxillary sinus hyperplasia along with that oval shape of maxillary sinus and oval shape of the orbit. And as we said, see, the inferior wall of the maxillary sinus will be having alveolar fossa through which we will be having tooth like incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. The tooth present are incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. But the floor of the maxillary sinus floor is formed by mostly the premolars and molars. Okay, incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. Usually, we are having the 4 types of tooth, but the floor of the maxillary sinus usually formed by the premolar region and molar tooth. So, any infections which involve these molar and premolar tooth, the infection may spread from the tooth to the maxillary sinus. So this is the reason why usually the patients usually having tooth pain, like either premolars or molars, sometimes the canines, the patient may also have headache, and there is a tenderness and dragging sensation and painful sensation in the cheek region and head region, because the floor of the maxillary sinus is formed by this premolar and molar tooth. And another point which we should consider here is, especially in dental treatment, any patient usually having caries teeth or any infection to these teeth like premolars and molars, if the dental surgeon is able to, trying to extract those teeth, we should be very careful while extracting these teeth, because the area in the floor of the maxillary sinus is very thin, and if you accidentally injure the floor of the maxillary sinus, we may get oroantral fistula. And regarding the causes of oroantral fistula, these dental infections and extraction of tooth are one of the most common causes for oroantral fistula. Oroantrum. Oral means oral cavity. Antrum means, as we said earlier, maxillary antrum. Maxillary antrum. And there will be a communication between the antrum and the maxillary sinus, because improper extraction of tooth or injury to the maxillary sinus floor may cause fistula and communicate the oral cavity and sinus cavity. So that obviously there will be ascending and descending infections. If there is a maxillary sinus infection, the pus may drain from up and into the oral cavity, and any infections from the adjacent tooth, it may go into the up. And applied anatomy point of view, these are the few points regarding maxillary sinus. And now coming to the next sinus, ethmoid sinus. Ethmoid means sieve-like. In Telugu we will call like Jallada. Sieve-like. Ethmoid means sieve-like. And which I also said before, the first sinus to start developing is maxillary sinus, and the next sinus which is going to develop is the ethmoid sinus. Usually the maxillary sinus start developing at 7 to 9 weeks, and ethmoid sinus starts to develop at 9 to 10 weeks of gestation, and few cells are present at birth. And another MCQ which will be present right now is the sinuses which are present at birth is maxillary sinus and ethmoid sinus, which are usually, this question will be coming in the MCQ point of view. The sinuses which are present at birth are maxillary sinus and ethmoid sinus, and the first sinus to start develop is maxillary sinus. Hope you are clear up to now, at least MCQ point of view and some clinical points. So as we said earlier, the name of the sinuses comes from the bone in which it lies. The ethmoid sinus lies within the labyrinth of the ethmoid bone, And previously said it is divided into three groups: anterior group, middle group, and posterior group. Anterior, middle, and posterior group. And coming to in the ethmoid sinus, again these cells are divided. I mean, this sinus is again divided into multiple cells, which are almost in 3 to 18 in number. Because as we said, ethmoid means sieve-like. There will be small cells which are multiple in number, sieve-like holes. There will the cells in the ethmoid also will be multiple in number. And usually from as we go from anterior to posterior, the size of the sinus, the size of the cell in the ethmoid sinus will increase, and obviously the number also will decrease. Size increases and number decreases. So obviously in anterior ethmoid cells, there will be multiple number, 3 to 18 in number, and the size of the cell is smaller. And compared to the posterior ethmoid cells, the number is lesser. Posterior group usually 1 to 7 in number, and the size compared to the anterior group of ethmoid cells, it will be larger. These points you should make sure. Coming to the relations of the ethmoid sinus, the roof is, as you said, ethmoid means sieve-like. You can see small cavities in the ethmoid sinus. These are all, as my pointer shows, these are all the ethmoid sinuses, ethmoid cells in the ethmoid sinus, which will be having, as we go posteriorly, this is the posterior side, you will be having much larger cells compared to the anterior cells, which are more in number and smaller in size. These are bigger in number and lesser in size. And roof is formed by the anterior cranial fossa. This ethmoid sinus lies between the orbit and the nasal cavity or the septum. Laterally, it is formed by the orbit, which is separated by lamina papyracea. There is a thin bone separating the ethmoid sinus and the orbit, which is known as the lamina papyracea, which is a very thin bone. And you should be very cautious regarding during surgery for functional endoscopic surgery, because inadvertent injury to this lamina papyracea may cause orbital complications, because as very thin paper thin bone separating the orbit and the ethmoid sinus. And this is the reason why usually ethmoidal infections or ethmoid sinusitis, especially in immunocompromised patients, because this is very thin part, the infection from the ethmoid sinus may traverse through those thin bone and invade those in bone and enter into the orbit, which may lead to orbital complications. So in the maxillary sinus, we learned that in the flow, while doing dental surgeries or dental extraction of tooth, we should be cautious regarding the floor of the maxillary sinus, because it may ascend the infection and cause orodental fistula. And in ethmoid sinus, the medial wall of the ethmoid sinus or the lateral wall of the orbit, we should be cautious while during surgery, which is a lamina papyracea, this thin bone, because in ethmoid sinus this infection may traverse the orbit. So these are practical points of view or clinical point of view. Coming to the blood supply, it is supplied by sphenopalatine artery, anterior and posterior ethmoid artery, which are the branches of ophthalmic artery. Lymphatic drainage, submandibular nodes, as we said, anterior part of anterior ethmoid group or anterior ethmoidal cells will be draining into the submandibular nodes, and posteriorly it will be draining into the retropharyngeal lymph nodes behind the pharynx, retropharynx. Nerve supply, as usual, anterior and posterior ethmoidal nerves. The name indicates anterior group by anterior ethmoidal nerves and posterior ethmoidal nerves, and orbital branches of pterygopalatine ganglia. So another clinical point of view is this ethmoid cells will pneumatize. I mean, as we said, there are cells important. The cells in the anterior group are Agarnase cell, ethmoid bulla, supraorbital cell, frontoethmoidal cell, and Heller cell. Important cells in posterior group are sphenoethmoidal or Onedi cell. What exactly these Agarnase, supraorbital, or Heller cells are? Briefly, I will tell. These, in the process of pneumatization of ethmoid sinus, these ethmoid sinus will go beyond the boundary of ethmoid. Okay, as we said earlier, ethmoid sinus name is derived from the sinus which is present in the ethmoid bone, or in the bone it lies. Ethmoid sinus usually restricted to ethmoid bone, but if the pneumatization of ethmoid sinus is beyond the ethmoid bone, there are certain cells which are present in those pneumatized regions the names are came according to that. Agar-Nasse, if the pneumatization of the ethmoid sinus extends into the lacrimal bone, lacrimal is somewhat anterior and superior, anterosuperior to the ethmoid sinus. So if the pneumatization of the ethmoid sinus extend up to the lacrimal bone or and frontal process of maxilla, the cell that there is known as Agar-Nasse cell. Okay, hope are you following?
Yes.
Okay, so
Sure.
okay, thank you. The cell which pneumatizes to the lacrimal bone is known as Agar-Nasse cell. So another clinical or MCQ point of view is lacrimal bone is somewhat anterosuperior to ethmoid sinus. So Agar-Nasse, which cell is the most anterior in ethmoid cell means they may give the options like Agar-Nasse, Heller, ethmoidal cell, or front ethmoidal cell, or Onady cell. So you may get MCQ, which is the most anterior ethmoid cell. Here the answer should be agar cell. Okay, this is under MCQ point of view. Those who are interested in MCQs apart from theory, so the most anterior cell in ethmoid is Agar-Nasse cell, and this is the ethmoidal bulla, and this is the most common and most constant ethmoidal cell. So, and another MCQ point of view is the most constant and the largest ethmoidal cell is ethmoidal bulla. And supraorbital cell means if the pneumatization of the ethmoidal bulla extends above the orbit, the pneumatization of the ethmoid cell extends above the orbit, it is known as supraorbital cell. And another cell is Heller cell. And if the pneumatization of the ethmoid cells or ethmoid sinus extends into the maxillary sinus, as we know, the maxillary sinus roof and the ethmoid sinus are almost adjacent. If the pneumatization of the ethmoid sinus extends into the maxillary sinus, which is below, it is known as Heller cell. Okay, which is also known as infraorbital cell. The another name for Heller cell is infraorbital cell. You may also get the question like this, as there is a supraorbital cell which is above the orbit, and another cell is infraorbital cell, which is a pneumatization of the ethmoid cell into the maxillary sinus. So Heller cell is also known as infraorbital cell. You may get also MCQ like this, which is the infraorbital cell. You may get options like Agar-Nasse, Onody, Heller, or some other cell like ethmoidal cell. The answer should be here is Heller cell. Okay. And now coming to the posterior group of cells, it's known as sphenoethmoid or Onody cells. So if the pneumatization of the ethmoid sinus extends into the sphenoid bone or lateral wing of the sphenoid, the cell there is known as Onody cell. So the name indicates sphenoethmoid because the ethmoid cell which is pneumatizing into the sphenoid region is known as sphenoethmoid, also known as Onody cell. Onody cell belongs to posterior group. Here you may get another MCQ, which is a posterior group of ethmoid cell. The options again will be Onody cell, Heller cell, Agar cell, and ethmoidal cell or supraorbital cell. Here we should go to Onody cell. So hope you all are clear up to now. So again, recap what I said. Anterior most ethmoidal air cell is known as Agar-Nasse cell, as we said, because the pneumatization extends into the lacrimal bone, which is anterior. This, if the as we know, this large Agar-Nasse cell can impede frontal drainage because its close proximity to the frontal drainage pathway. This Agar-Nasse cell forms the anterior boundary of the frontal sinus or frontal recess. So if the Agar-Nasse cell will enlarge, which will grow, if there is normal, if there is pneumatized, over pneumatized, this Agar-Nasse cell may block the drainage of the frontal sinus and may lead to frontal sinusitis. And as we said, Heller cell belong to the anterior group of ethmoid cell. These cells are also known as infraorbital cell. Enlargement of the cell may block drainage of the maxillary sinus. As we said earlier, infraorbital cell or Heller cell belongs to which is present at the superior region of the maxillary sinus. If there is enlargement of this Heller cell or infraorbital cell, the drainage of the maxillary sinus will be impeded and may lead to maxillary sinusitis. And another posterior group of cell is Onodi cell. As we said, extension of this posterior ethmoid cell superior lateral to the sphenoid sinus. So it is also known as sphenoethmoidal cell or Onodi cell. This because of this pneumatization, we should be very cautious because there will be close proximity of optic nerve and internal carotid artery close to this Onodi cell in the sphenoid sinus. So any inflammation or infection of the sphenoid sinus may cause blindness or optic nerve damage. So especially during endoscopic sinus surgery. So before we should be very cautious and should rule out Onodi cell presence, and we should do the surgery very cautiously if there is a presence of Onodi cell, because usually the optic nerve and internal carotid artery will be lying superior lateral to the sphenoid side proper. But if there is pneumatization of the ethmoid cell into the sphenoid sinus, Onodi cell will be present as we discussed now. So this optic nerve will be coming in proximity to the Onodi cell and not the sphenoid sinus. So as Onodi cell is a posterior ethmoid cell, which will be more anterior compared to the sphenoid sinus, and so during a function endoscopic sinus surgery, we should be very cautious of the presence of Onodi cell or not. And now coming to the next sinus, frontal sinus, you can see these are the two or the frontal sinuses as paired structure. Usually these frontal sinuses are asymmetrical. Usually one will be larger and one will be smaller in size. And those two are usually separated by the septum, which is known as interfrontal septum or intrafrontal septum. Interfrontal septum. And any septa which are present within the frontal sinus, left or right, those are known as intrafrontal septum. And as name indicates, these frontal sinuses will be present within the frontal bone. And coming to the shape of the frontal sinus, is usually roughly triangular in shape, with base pointing towards this front midline and apex pointing towards the supraorbital region, apex region. Among the sinuses which shows the maximum variation is maxillary sinus. Frontal sinus, and this you may also get this MCQ point. The sinus which shows the maximum variation. As we said earlier, there will be a developmental anomaly for every sinuses, like maxillary hypoplasia or frontal aplasia or frontal hypoplasia or frontal hyperpneumatization. So this sinuses among the four usually shows the maximum variation. Now coming to the relations of the frontal sinus, this will be the frontal sinus, and the anterior wall of the frontal sinus will be formed by the bone covering the frontal bone, anterior part, and the skin over that. And posterior wall of the frontal sinus will be obviously the bone, brain, which is the anterior cranial fossa and brain. Floor is formed by the upper part of the orbit. And regarding sinuses which are present at birth, usually we said maxillary sinus and ethmoid sinus will be present at birth, but not definitely maxillary. I mean, frontal sinus is not present at birth. It starts developing after birth. And in some books, it is also said that sphenoid sinus is usually somewhat rudimentary at birth, but not definitely frontal sinus. So if you may get the question, which are the sinuses which are present at birth, and you will be having options maxillary, ethmoid, go with those options. And if the question is like this, which is a sinus which is not present at birth, and you will be having four options, maxillary, sphenoid, ethmoid, and frontal, you may opt here the frontal sinus, because frontal sinus is definitely not present at birth and it starts developing after birth. Sphenoid sinus usually somewhat rudimentary at birth and starts after 3 years. See the frontal sinus, frontal ostium, and frontal races. These three form hourglass appearance. You all aware of the thing like hourglass appearance? Usually they will be used to know the time. There will be there is a conical shape above and conical shape below, and there will be a narrow constriction in the middle. The frontal sinus will be above, and there is a narrow constriction which is known as the ostium, and here is the frontal races below which, through which the secretions or frontal sinus drain through this ostia or infundibulum opening and through this frontal races, and this frontal races opens into the middle meatus, and there will be this shape is known as hourglass appearance. And in functional endoscopic surgery, the point here we should make sure is we will operate on the frontal recess but not in the frontal sinus, because in the remaining sinuses you will be operating in maxillary sinus once the ostium is widened, and ethmoid sinus will clear every ethmoidal cell and sphenoid sinus. But here in frontal sinus you will be clearing this frontal recess and opening this frontal ostium, but usually will not operate the frontal sinus. Will go up through that frontal races, ostium, and frontal sinus, usually in the shape of hourglass. And this frontal sinus drainage into the middle meatus is also dependent on the attachment of the uncinate process. See, this is the orbit. Hope you all able to see here. This is the orbit, and this is the midline of the septum. And this here comes the frontal bone and frontal sinuses. So this is a maxillary sinus. The point where I'm showing is a maxillary sinus. This blackish structure, this is known as inferior turbinate bone, which is a separate bone, and this is the middle turbinate bone. Okay, and this red color structure which is coming from the inferior turbinate bone is known as uncinate process. It's a sickle shaped bone, very thin bone. Depending upon the attachment of this uncinate process to various structures, the drainage of the frontal sinus depends. Okay, usually the frontal sinus ostium will be present in the anterior part of the floor of the frontal sinus, and through this ostium the frontal recess comes, and the drainage of the frontal sinus will be occurring. And depending upon this attachment of the uncinate process, whether it is attached to ethmoid bone, this is ethmoid bone where I am showing, and this is a middle turbinate. So here the uncinate process is attached to the middle turbinate here, and this is orbit. Here the uncinate process is attached to the lateral wall, orbital wall, that is lamina papyracea. You can see the uncinate process is attached to the orbit here. Here it is attached to the middle turbinate. Here it is attached superiorly straight into the ethmoidal bone, central or ethmoidal roof. Depending upon these attachments, the frontal sinus drainage pathway will be depending upon. Here the drainage will be lateral to the, into the maxillary sinus. Here the drainage will be lateral because there is an obstruction here. Here attached, the frontal sinus will be draining here into the maxillary sinus. Here into the maxillary sinus. Here, because of the attachment into the lateral side, the drainage will be into the midline, medial side. Okay. Here the frontal sinus will be draining into the medial side. Hope you are clear. This is a very important point, clinical point of surgical point of view. We should make sure the attachment of the uncinate process. We should make sure that depending upon the attachment of the uncinate process, the drainage of the frontal sinus will be depending. And coming to the next sinus, which is the sphenoid sinus. This arrow where I am showing is a sphenoid sinus. This is the nasal cavity here, which is lies behind the upper part of the nasal cavity. Here, this is a sphenoid sinus. This one in the axial point of view, and this is a sagittal view. It occupies the body and sometimes the wing and pterygoid process. This is the body of the sphenoid bone. The average capacity of sphenoid sinus is 7 ml. As we said, this pneumatization of the sinus begins during the 3rd year of childhood and gets completed by 17th year of life. With reference to sella turcica, this the point which you should make sure both clinical point of view and practical point of view is, I mean, exam point of view is sella turcica. This we hope you are all aware of what is sella turcica here. This is a saddle-like depression which present above the sphenoid bone is a sella turcica, in which the lies the pituitary gland. Okay. And depending upon the pneumatization of the sinus, there are three types of pneumatization known as cellar type, precellar type, and conchal type. So this is the sphenoid sinus, and this is the sella turcica, in which the pituitary gland lies. If the pneumatization of the sphenoid sinus is before the if you lie, so this is a cell. Hope all are you able to see this picture. This is a sella turcica in which the lies the pituitary gland. If you draw a line from the anterior wall of the sella turcica, if the pneumatization of the sphenoid sinus is anterior or before to that anterior wall, this is known as conchal type. In this conchal type, it is a rudimentary type of pneumatization, which is not more common, and there will be also bone present in this. This is pneumatization. This there will be air here. There will be a bone between the pituitary gland and the pneumatized sphenoid sinus. In the precellar type, the pneumatization extends up to the anterior wall of the sella turcica, but not behind that. But in cellar type, the pneumatization of the sphenoid sinus extends behind the sella turcica, or it involves whole body of the sphenoid sinus. Hope you are clear in this point, because this pneumatization pattern in the sagittal plane of CT scan is very important in surgical point of view or approach to the sphenoid sinus. If there is no pneumatization, there is no point of entry into the pituitary gland or surgeries into the pituitary gland through nose or transsphenoidal approach. We'll be going through the nose, transnasal and transsphenoidal into the pituitary gland. Surgeons, the FES has developed so like that we'll be able to operate on the pituitary sinus through this nose, through the transnasal and transsphenoidal approach. If the sphenoid sinus pneumatization is not cellar, if it is conchal or precellar type, this approach may impede us going into the pituitary gland, because obviously there is no pneumatization and bone is obstructing our entry into the pituitary sinus. We can't do this transsphenoidal approach to the pituitary sinus. Hope you all are clear in this point. Hello.
Yes.
And now coming to the relations of the pituitary gland, you will be having, this is the relations of the sphenoid sinus. The arrow where indicates is the sphenoid sinus. The above, which is present superiorly, is the pituitary gland, which lies in the sella turcica, as we said earlier. And the lateral boundaries of this sphenoid sinus are third nerve, this one, third nerve, fourth nerve, and fifth nerve. In the fifth nerve, V1 and V2 comes under the lateral boundary of this sphenoid sinus. And cavernous sinus also comes under the boundary of sphenoid sinus. And within the cavernous sinus, you will be having internal carotid artery and optic nerve. Sorry, abducens nerve and internal carotid artery you will be having within the cavernous sinus and part of the boundary of sphenoid sinus. Above you will be having this optic nerve, optic chiasma, everything, pituitary gland, we will be having above boundaries. Below will be the nasopharynx. The arrow where I indicates is the nasopharynx. And another thing is the sphenoid sinus ostium is usually present in the anterior wall of the sphenoid sinus. Anterior wall, posterior wall, medial wall, and superior wall. These all will be present in the sphenoid sinus. In the anterior wall of the sphenoid sinus, at the level of roof, you will be having this sphenoid sinus ostium. Initially, you use it by rough method, usually from the choanal part, this nasopharynx, also known as posterior choana, not nasal part, posterior end of the nasal cavity or choana. The sphenoid sinus ostium is usually located 1 to 1.5 centimeter above the choana. This is a rough estimation of location of choana, I mean sphenoid sinus ostium, which is usually 1 to 1.5 centimeter above the choana. And from anterior to posterior, sphenoid sinus is usually located 7 centimeters from the anterior spine of maxilla to the sphenoid sinus. If you want to roughly measure where the sinus is, it is usually 7 centimeters from the anterior spine of maxilla up to the sphenoid sinus. This sphenoid sinus usually drain into the sphenoethmoid recess. Usually the maxillary sinus, anterior ethmoid sinus and frontal sinus all drain into the middle meatus. Posterior ethmoid drains into the superior meatus and sphenoid sinus drains into the sphenoethmoid recess. And coming to the arterial supply, posterior ethmoidal and internal carotid artery, as you know, it is a part of this boundaries. Venous, it will be pterygoid vena plexus and cavernous sinus. Lymph nodes, it drains into the retropharyngeal lymph nodes. And this is somewhat brief description, development and growth of paranasal sinuses. As we said earlier, the maxillary sinus and ethmoid sinuses are present at birth. These are the MCQs. And if usually frontal sinus and sphenoid sinus are not present at birth, but if there is a question like which is not present at birth, strictly go to frontal sinus. This is because the questions on paranasal sinuses will be very fancy for the examiner. I am stressing on that apart from theory part. And maxillary sinus growth will be as there is having biphasic growth, it will be growing up to 3 to 7 years in the first phase and usually 7 to 18 years second phase. And ethmoid sinus stops growing or adult size by 12 years. And another point here is frontal sinus is late to develop after birth, and it is the last sinus to reach its adult size. So last to develop and last to attain adult size is frontal sinus. Okay, this is another MCQ, and this is the first radiological appearance. The maxillary sinus is the first sinus to appear at birth, which is start developing, and which is also the first sinus which is radiologically appearing. I mean, which appear, which means 4 to 6 months after birth. This is the lateral wall of the nasal cavity. I conclude with this. Usually, you will be having 3 conchal bones: superior superior concha, middle concha, and inferior concha. And the openings or spaces below those concha are known as inferior meatus. Okay. In the inferior meatus, you will be having nasolacrimal duct opening. This here, the nasolacrimal duct opening will be present. In the middle meatus, you will be having maxillary sinus opening, frontal sinus opening, and anterior ethmoid sinus opening. And in the superior meatus, which is below the superior turbinate or superior concha, the posterior ethmoid sinus opens. In the sphenoethmoid recess, you will be opening of the sphenoid sinus here. And here another MCQ is which sinus does not open into middle meatus. You will be having all these options: maxillary, frontal, anterior ethmoid, and posterior ethmoid. The answer will be here posterior ethmoid. Okay. Or you may get an answer like this: which sinus opens into the superior meatus. Here again the answer will be posterior ethmoid sinus. These are very, very important for MCQ point of view. And peculiarity of the sphenoid sinus it opens into the sphenoethmoid recess, which is above the superior turbinate and lateral to the septum. In between the septum and the superior turbinate is a sphenoethmoid recess. Below the superior turbinate is a superior meatus. So which sinus opens into the sphenoethmoid recess is sphenoid sinus. Okay. So hope this picture makes more clear. This is a sphenoid sinus opening. Here is posterior ethmoid, anterior ethmoid, everything. And practical point of view is this anterior ethmoid, posterior ethmoid, and maxillary sinus. Usually, the sinuses or secretions which from these anterior group of sinuses will be draining anterior to the teres tubaris. Okay, teres tubaris you will be knowing, which is guarding the eustachian tube orifice. Okay, the anatomy is over or I don't know, but these anterior and posterior ethmoidal sinuses and maxillary sinus and frontal sinus, they drain usually Anterior ethmoid and maxillary sinus secretions usually draining anterior to the torus tubaris, which will be covering the lateral pharyngeal wall. If there is infection of these sinuses anterior groove, there will be hypertrophy of the lateral pharyngeal wall. If the infection from the sphenoid sinus or frontal sinus, though sphenoid sinus especially, there will be secretions coming from the posterior pharyngeal wall. See, if you see any patient secretions coming around the posterior pharyngeal wall, you may suspect sphenoid sinusitis or frontal sinusitis. And if the secretions will be coming along the nasal cavity and draining along the posterior pillar and lateral pharyngeal wall, you may suspect ethmoid sinusitis or maxillary sinusitis. This is another clinical point of view. And now anatomy, I said briefly. Hope you are all are clear. Before winding up, I will roughly tell about the physiology of paranasal sinuses. Hello. The functions of paranasal sinuses are humidification. It humidifies or insulates the air which we breathe, because these paranasal sinuses create a large surface area, and this humidifies and modifies the temperature. If you breathe cold air or hot air, it adjusts to the temperature our body is having. So the main function of this paranasal sinus is humidification, and it also acts as a vocal resonance. It adds tone to the voice, because we all aware that if you're having any nasal infections, the tone of our voice changes. So this paranasal sinuses or sinusitis will be having the voice change because it adds resonance to our voice. As we know, these are empty spaces present in the skull. These make our head or skull weigh lighter. So we won't feel our head weight because you are having empty spaces in the skull. And the other function of this paranasal sinus is heat insulation. It maintains the required heat so that there will be no damage to the intracranial or intraorbital structures which are close vicinity to the ethmoid sinus or sphenoid sinus. And it also acts as a physical buffer against injury to the face, because as we said, these are compressible structures, empty cavities. If there is any trauma or any accidents, there will be these act as physical buffers. I mean, these act as supporting structures regarding injury to the face. And coming to the ventilation part of paranasal sinuses, usually the ventilation of paranasal sinuses you will be taking in the opposite way of the respiratory system. This ventilation of the paranasal sinuses will be occurring in the expiration and not inspiration. In respiratory system, as we inspire, the air enters in and the expansion will be taking place, and there will be ventilation of the lungs. But in paranasal sinuses, the ventilation of the sinuses will be occurring in the expiration period. In inspiration, there will be more velocity or more air entry, and there will be negative pressure in the nasal cavity, so that the air in the sinuses will empty through the rostia into the nasal cavity. But in expiration, there will be a positive pressure and there will be less velocity. Because of the positive pressure through the ostia from the nose, the air enters into the sinuses through the ostia. So there will be ventilation of the paranasal sinuses in expiration and not inspiration, which is opposite to our respiratory system. Hello. So with this, I conclude this anatomy and physiology. Hello, students. Anyone there?
Yes, sir.
I hope at least few points made your day. I think. Hope at least few people understood. I will be taking attendance now. Anyone there? Please come. Yeah.
Please chat box.
Chat. Hello, CR Prakash. Jyoti Prakash. Hello, Jyoti Prakash.
Chat box.
Please keep the attendance in the chat box. Mr. CR Jyoti Prakash. Hope you are clear, able to hear me.
Hello. Hello.
It is